Andy and I are going to talk about what happened. So I just got back from holidays after I/O, so I'm sorry. So I'm not going to talk about all the topics in detail, but I'm going to mention like what they cover. So hopefully I can help you decide which of the like 100 plus videos to watch. Okay, so first up is what's new in Support Lib. Who uses the Support Lib here? Cool. So it was given by Chris Baines, Teng Hui, and Alan Viveret. And Alan is like the team lead for the Support Lib. So I didn't know that. I learned that in I/O that there was a team lead for Support Lib. So they talked about fragments, the thing we love to hate. There are new APIs and some bug fixes. I'm gonna mention them more a bit later. Next are notifications. So there are a few nice new APIs there available in the Support Lib. You can now check if the user has enabled notifications for your app. So you know how like they can go into settings and enable and disable. You can also now check what setting the user has enabled for your app, like low priority, high priority, and default. Media, browsing and playback APIs, custom tabs. The cool thing I learned about custom tabs is we've always heard them talk about Chrome tabs, but apparently it can work in any browser. So that's pretty cool. They said like if Firefox or IE, supports it, like it will be available for you. So the thing to remember according to them is that the custom tab shares the cache and cookies with the browser. And one thing to remember if you're preloading URLs is that make sure you only load URLs that you are at least 50% confident that the user will load. So the example they gave was if they go to the developer docs, they might go to samples. So it also allows you to customize UI like the toolbar and animations. They talked about a lot. Vector drawable and animated vector drawable. If you tried using this before, you know that they released it and then they took it back and now they're bringing it back. So they said that hopefully like all the memory issues that they had is solved by this version 24.0. So if you want to know what happened there, like what the memory leak was and how it came about, watch this talk because Chris Baines talked in length about it. So they also talked about how you can use it in your app and how you can migrate from your current PNGs to vector drawables and animated vector drawables. So lots of code samples they showed in their talk. Next is app compat. So night mode, it's been out for a while. What do I mean by this? So I have a thing in my speaker, so I don't know what that means. So color state list based on your theme. Oh, you can theme your, you can now use your theme colors in color state list XMLs. So color based on your themes are color state normal. You know the colors you use for ripples and status bars and stuff. So you can now use them in your color state lists. Bottom sheets in design is a big thing. So I think most of us use third-party libraries before, but now there's a first-party implementation in two modes, persistent and modal. You don't get just one, you get two. And plus plus is a sneak peek, which is actually just one thing, which is they're dropping support for APIs below 9. So does anybody support API below 9 here? No? Okay, we're all safe then. Right. Next talk that was really interesting for me is What the Fragment by Adam Powell. So Adam works on the UI Toolkit team, and he gave a great history of how fragments came about and what was their thinking behind introducing fragments. So it's basically with Honeycomb, larger screen sizes mean they have to figure out how to break up these giant activities into composable bits. And that basically means for us developers that the more screen size you have, the more problems you have. So he goes through the reasons why they decide on the life cycles and like the basically the nitty gritty of how fragments are implemented in the framework. And this really interested me because a lot of people have been talking lately about architecture patterns, right? Like MVP, MVVP, or like M whatever P whatever you have. So he says like an idea they have in the framework is that there is an organizational hierarchy that their packages follow. So basically, it's a one-way street. So if you have Android that app, it can only import anything below it. So widget, view, content. So he says it's not a hard rule because they mess it up sometimes, but basically that's one idea of how you can organize your code. So anything on the right side cannot import anything on the other end of the flow. So I think that's one good example of how we can all organize our code too. So it's not strictly a pattern of like following one set hierarchy, but an idea. What else? So a main point he makes a lot in his talk is that do not use fragments as a simple view or view group. So if you can have a layout that you can include, don't use a fragment for it. So personally, I was surprised by it because I didn't know that people actually consider using fragments for views, but apparently people do. So don't do that, according to him. So bug fixes, as I mentioned before in the V24 support lib, a big thing they fixed is child fragments. So fragment within fragments. So he says now that when you add it to your transaction, when you get it back, you can be guaranteed that it's in the state you left it. So yeah. So there is a new API called commit now, because before what do we use? We use execute pending transactions, which sometimes doesn't work really that well with child fragments. So he gave an example of like what happens when it doesn't work as expected. He just said like it's a big problem and it's weird. So, but they really encourage people to report bugs. So be that Android.com, like I know that they are actively looking into bugs. So yeah, try it out if you have nested fragments in your app. And so yeah, his recurring theme is make your fragments as isolated as possible. So if you have a hosting activity, don't let your fragment check anything with the parent. So it's basically try to make it as drag and drop in as possible. So you can, that's basically the idea of fragments, that they said they regret not making people understand better, is that fragments should be really isolated pieces of code that you can put things into it, but it can't, if you have like an isolated silo of code. Yeah. So advanced data binding. Who uses data binding? Okay, so for most of you who don't use it, sorry, this will not make sense to you. So not in beta anymore. I was surprised by it because that was a question I have. When they came out with data binding, I tried it in our app in one layout, and I was like, I won't use it for anything else because it's in beta. So apparently it's not anymore. So use it in your app. So what is it and how does it work? So it's basically Butterknife but made by Google. So yeah. But it's Butterknife plus plus but made by Google. So if you watch the talk by Yeet, according to him, that's how you pronounce his name, Yeet. So if according to Yeet, that is something that they should have released when Android came out 8 years ago. Yeah, and he wrote it like last year. So So what is data binding? So it's basically doing away with find view by IDs in your code and enabling your layouts to assign values to your views. It's pretty neat. So what's new is two-way data binding. So for the 5 of you who use data binding, so now you can actually assign values back into your model. So if you haven't used it, I strongly suggest you look at how data binding can work for you. So Yit actually has steps on how to start using it for everyone. For most of the people in this room who don't use it yet. So he outlines steps on how you can integrate it with your app. So yeah, makes sense. Don't use it everywhere. Use it for a new layout. Try it out and see how it goes with your app. Oh, sorry. So he also talks about best practices. Using data binding in in recycler views is now possible because he also wrote recycler views. So he gave stuff in this talk about how to make data binding work best for you. Material improvement. So this one I really love. Nick Butcher talk about his Plaid app. So I suggest that if you haven't downloaded Plaid, get it from the Play Store. It's in beta. You can be a beta tester and play with it because he has a lot of implementations of material design guidelines and animations. It's open source. You can just copy paste it. It's awesome. So he goes through each material principle. So surfaces, graphic design, and motion. Lots of tiny animations. And so Nick is a designer. So it looks really nice and really clean. So yeah, and then just copy paste this code. So if you watch his talk, he has lots and lots and lots of code samples, and he goes through his thinking of why he implemented something that way and how it relates to the material guidelines. So other talks of note, experts guide. So I didn't talk about the tools because I figured most of you watched it already because most of us use tools, right? Who still uses Eclipse? Last time I gave a talk, there was one guy. So I think he's not here today though. So, so if you use Recycler View ins and outs is really good. Yit talks about how view recycling works in Recycler View. So how the pool and the cache work. It's interesting. I didn't understand any of it, but so Chris Baines talked about Android themes and styles. What goes into your themes, what goes into your style, and how the framework reads values out of both of them. Window into transitions is by Nick Butcher again. It's all about shared element transitions and activity transitions and stuff. And the fireside chat is where all the people from the framework team got up on stage and people can ask them questions. So, resources. Excuse me. I made the script of YouTube DL script of most Android and Firebase talks. So it's a gist. You can just get it, but I don't know how big everything is. There is a constraint layout code lab. According to Roman Guy, his team made this. He said they really don't want people to touch XML anymore. So please try it out. I'm sure they fixed a lot of bugs. Android Studio is now in preview 3. Well, they fixed dependency resolution in preview 3, which was broken in preview 2. So yeah, instant run is broken in preview 3 for me, but so and there's a YouTube playlist of all the talks. It's 187 videos. So yep, that's it. Thank you. If you want to see photos, come over.